Welcome into another edition of the Office of Student Media's Roundtable coverage of the Metro State men's magical run through the NCAA tournament. I am Justin Taylor. Joining me is the Metropolitan's Angel Foster, the Met Report and Roadrunner Review co-hosts Peter Aragon and Kevin Hall. And team, we have watched a pretty special run, but before we recap the tournament and the postseason play, let's start with a little non-conference play. Angel, our guys started out going off against Winona State. That was a big matchup early in the season.
It was a true test for them, Justin. Winona State coming off a winning season last year, bringing back 4 of their 5 starters, and they were 14-1 last year at home. So that was a really big win for our guys. The Roadrunners, I think, won that game on their trademark defense, causing 23 turnovers, and they made 18 points off those 23 turnovers. So, yeah, that was a really big win on the road.
Absolutely. Frenetic pace. Definitely favorite the Roadrunners in that, not a Winona type of game. Let's get into the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference play. Peter, no complaints if you're a Roadrunner fan, right?
There was no complaining coming from Metro fans. I mean, they won their first 18 games in the RMAC play. In the first 9 games, their closest game was 16 points, and that was against Carl School of Mines. And then they came home against Adams State, Fort Lewis. Those games were a little bit closer. Against Fort Lewis, they forced 15 turnovers while only giving up 8. That helped them win 71-65 against that. Free throws were huge in that one. So Metro State really dominated through the first part of RMAC play. After that win against Fort Lewis, they had a tough road test in Gunnison taking on Western State. They only won that by 5 points. And after that, it was again back to that 16-point, 20-point wins for them before they went on another 2 true tough road test up in Durango.
Yes, first 18 games or so, very good for the Roadrunners. After that, things get a little bit shaky. The fellas did hit the road, went down south, southern Colorado, Durango, and Kevin, seems like things fell apart in the last 10 minutes of the game?
Yeah, everything wasn't coming up roses at that point. I mean, McCarran and Kay both fouled out against Fort Lewis with about 14 minutes left to play. That really took a toll on them. And then Fort Lewis, they were running the 1-3-1 zone defense. That was basically singling out Morse underneath, and then Herrera was just eating them up. And then you had Ayala, he would drive in. Huge factor in that game. That really just took them down for their first loss of the season. They did get back on track against Adams State, showed that they would rebound and just that power that they possess. Then next week, much of the same thing. A shocker against CSU Pueblo here at home, and it was a last-second bucket by the Thunderwolves. Metro's free throws attempts, that started to really come up as an issue in that game, but they ended up figuring that out near the end of the season and finished strong.
Indeed. Fellas closed the season out with a 98-80 victory over UC Colorado Springs. Really dominant fashion in that last game of the season, and then they were preparing for postseason play. Last year, not a really good postseason run through the RMAC. Ended up losing 63-67 to Colorado Mesa. And you talked about CSU Pueblo and that loss. Didn't get any easier, Angel, because they were going up against another guard-oriented team in Colorado Christian.
You're right, Justin. They did go up against a tough team. CCU was coming off a 4-game winning streak, and Metro was able to shut them down 87-75. But the CCU was shooting from outside the arc. They were 4 for 11 from outside the arc, and Metro was only 1 for 7. Metro was 30 of 60 shooting, and that included 4 of 12 from behind the arc, which that was only 33% shooting at that point. So, and then we went in and we had the rebounding, and we had 44 rebounds for the game, which was really good.
You said it. Rebounding really played a difference in that game. Helped the guys out all season long. Next up on the hit list was Colorado Mesa, and revenge factor definitely in play on this one. Peter, guys came out and asserted themselves quickly.
Yeah, it was pretty much Metro's game the whole way. They came out just on a huge run. I mean, the whole game they shot at 56.6% from the field. They shot above 80% from the free throw line, 89% from the free throw line, to be exact. They forced a couple technical fouls against the bench and also a couple players for Carl Mesa. So really got into the hedge, really bodied them up and bullied them all around. Jonathan Morris, the big man in the middle, you can't say enough about him. I mean, 21 points, 8 of 10 from the field, point on 6 rebounds, just huge in that middle. Just everyone in that game just contributed.
Yeah, that game was over right from the beginning. Colorado Mesa had packed their bags, and they were back in Grand Junction before the first half was even over. Next on the hit list, though, the Skyhawks. Kevin, this game was hyped up from the very beginning. Skyhawks had just defeated Metro State late in the season. You could go on forever talking about how big of a game this was.
Yeah, another revenge factor game, 2 games back-to-back after Mesa. I mean, you had to think, here we go again from the start of the game, because there's just a back and forth and back and forth. Marcus Ayala just driving through, gets the lead at the halftime, and then you never want to go into the halftime locker room down. But Metro came out firing, sort of controlled the second half at their pace, slowed it down, pretty much took out Herrera out of the game. He wasn't as big of a factor as previous games. And then, end of the game, one of the greatest shots in Metro history, in my opinion. Brandon Jefferson coming down, ice running through his veins, just clinching that game at the buzzer to send them to the regional tournament as hosts. That's just amazing.
Brandon Jefferson, game winner, that was huge. Getting revenge against the team that beat you earlier in the season, but getting the win when it mattered, that was great. Moving on to the NCAA tournament, Roadrunners trying to get a little bit further than they did last year when they lost in the Elite 8 round to the Montevallo Falcons. This year, Angel, they started out with the Tarleton Texans, and right from the beginning, you probably assumed this was a defensive matchup, right?
With the Roadrunners, it's always defense. And the Roadrunners were ready for the Texans for this game, and they beat them 76-65. What's interesting about this game is that all 5 of the starting lineup scored in double digits, and they scored 74 of the 76 points. The only other score came from Derek January, who added 2 to that. The only struggle that the Roadrunners did see in the game against the Texans was at the free throw line. Nicholas K is normally a 78% free throw shooter, and he only shot 63%. And then Jonathan Morris, also 71% free throw shooter, and he only shot 42%. It was a different story when the Roadrunners got to Midwestern in the semifinals. Free throws were a big factor, and they made those shots at the end of the game when they really needed them. And Metro went on to win that game 66-60.
Yeah, 2 hard-fought games against the Texans and the Mustangs, and I think that was a pretty good primer, Peter, for going up against a very strong team inside in St. Mary's.
Yeah, St. Mary's, they lost last year in the regional championship game to Midwestern, so they were looking to get past Metro, get on to that Elite 8 game, but Metro was in the way for them and just bodied them up. Really, the size of Metro really, I think, hampered St. Mary's. I don't think they've really seen anyone with the size of Metro. The speed of Metro, the guards really struggled against Brandon Jefferson, Demetrius Miller, Mitch McCarron. Both teams shot pretty well, though, from the field still. Metro 49%, St. Mary's 51%, but turnovers again. They forced 16 turnovers, or all of them giving up the ball 8 times. I mean, that's huge if you're going to move on into the NCAA tournament, get past these great teams that you're facing that you weren't facing on earlier in the year. And then free throws again, 20-24. They hit those key ones down the stretch. Sandufu hit some threes down the stretch, but Metro was able to pull away and win this one easily.
So after beating St. Mary's and wrapping up a regional championship for the 2nd season in a row, the fellas were headed back to the Elite 8. Franklin Pierce, though, was standing in the way between the Roadrunners' trip to the Final Four, Kevin.
Well, Metro did everything right in that game against Franklin Pierce. I mean, their leading scorer, Eric Jean-Guillaume, both Brandon Jefferson and Demetrius Miller held him in check to 0 points in that first half. And then what could be said about Metro's bench? Tyler Cooper coming off the bench scores 2 huge 3 buckets to sort of just push them over. And then, of course, we got to talk about Nicholas K. He played amazing in that game, scoring 19 points, leading the team. And he's definitely not playing like a sophomore. Metro goes on to win that game, setting up that match against West Liberty. West Liberty, leading scorer in the nation at 103 points. So Metro's a defensive team, so it's going to be a very good matchup, and it was. I mean, Metro went on a 15-0 run at the start of the game to go up 15-2, ended up going into the halftime locker room up 41-28, and West Liberty, they were struggling from beyond the arc. They're just a 3-point shooting team. And they started out the game 0 for 6, and that was courtesy of Metro's zone defense. And it was a very aggressive zone defense. West Liberty started to make a bit of a comeback. They got to within 1 point, mainly because of Alex Falk. He's the Division II Player of the Year. He ended up scoring 34 points, but Metro closed it out. Brandon Jefferson, Mitch McCarron, Nick Kay, everyone was just contributing that game. All the starters scored in double digits in that game, and that moved them on to set up that championship matchup against Drury.
Roadrunners knock off #1 ranked West Liberty and now are headed back to the national championship game for the first time since 2002. We will be back here in just about 24 hours to talk a little bit more about that matchup between the Roadrunners and the Panthers. I'm Justin Taylor. For Kevin Hall, Peter Aragon, and Angel Foster, we're out of here.